So, as a negotiation scholar and professor, I often get asked questions about ethics in negotiation. Sometimes I get asked, are there ethics at all in negotiation? Now, I have to say, I find this to be a slightly offensive question. I wouldn't have dedicated my entire professional life to an ethics-free activity. But the other question I get is, what are the ethical guideposts in negotiation? So in an earlier video I did called Are There Ethical Rules in Negotiation? I discuss some of the more formal and required ethical guides. Today I'm doing something different. Today I'm going to offer you 3 tips to guide you in your personal approach to negotiation ethics. So let's start with this critically important piece, which is actually knowing yourself. So what do I mean by that? Well, beyond rules, beyond the law, beyond what's expected in your job, at the end of the day, what really matters is, are you being true to your own values, to your own principles? In other words, at the end of a negotiation, if you went home and you looked at yourself in the mirror, could you say, today I acted in a way that I want to be seen, right? Can I look in the mirror and feel good about myself? Some of the kinds of questions that can actually be really helpful here can feel hokey, but I think they work. So for example, like if your mom knew what you did, would she be proud of you? Or if what you did ended up on the front cover of the New York Times, would that be okay with you? Or if you were reading your obituary, would the things you did in the negotiation today be consistent with what was in the obituary that was written for you? Those kinds of questions, right, help center yourself to know what are your limits, what are you prepared to do, and what doesn't feel right. My second piece of advice, though, is a really important one, and it relates to a specific way to prepare for negotiation. In other words, I would make ethical considerations a specific and intentional part of my negotiation preparation. So what do I mean by that, and why does it matter? First, what do I mean? By what do I mean thinking about, before I go into that negotiation, what are the kinds of questions that might come up that might make me more likely to say something untrue or to cross that ethical line. Well, why is that important? Here's the reason why. It turns out most people I know, and hopefully most people you know, and hopefully not you, most of us just do not wake up in the morning and say, today I am going to be for the devil. Today I am going to do the work of evil. Hardly anybody does that. In fact, though, what happens in these moments when we are faced with a choice to do something evil or to do something good, we end up doing something evil sometimes. And in negotiation, right, it's the same thing. Most people I know do not go into the negotiation saying, today I'm going to go into this negotiation and do something unethical. But in fact, we know people act unethically in negotiation all the time. And that is because of this psychological dynamic, which has been discussed by scholars Max Bazerman and Ann Tennisbrough, which is called ethical fading. So ethical fading is a form of self-deception, and it occurs when we subconsciously avoid or disguise the moral implications of a decision. And then it allows us to behave in immoral ways while maintaining the conviction that we are in fact good and moral people. And so this kind of ethical fading happens all the time in negotiation. I don't intend to be unethical, but then in the moment, I in fact am unethical. So what are some of the kinds of questions I should prepare for before I go in? Well, if it's a negotiation about maybe what went wrong or who should have done what, or it's a difficult conversation, if someone says something to you like, are you responsible for this? That's a question you could predict and you need to be prepared to answer. If it's a more traditional transactional negotiation, a buy-sell negotiation, you might be asked a question like, how low are you willing to go? Or if I made this offer to you, would you say yes? Or is this your best and last and final offer, right? All those kinds of questions are tough ones because if in fact you would say yes to it, then you don't necessarily want to say yes because then the negotiation is over, but you don't want to lie and say no because then you've acted unethically. So the more preparation you can do in advance to think about what are the kinds of questions that might come up that would pose an ethical dilemma and how will I answer them, right? So if someone says something to you like, would you say yes to this offer if it was the best we could do? And you know you would, and you don't want to lie, right? You may say something like, at this point, from my perspective, it's not whether I would say yes or no. It's important for me in this negotiation to make sure that we reach something that actually really meets your interests and my interests. In the same way that I wouldn't put an offer to you and say, would you say yes to this if it were my best and last offer? That's a way of handling it that retains your ethicality, that keeps the negotiation going, and that doesn't trap you. So ethical preparation is really important. The third piece of advice is really important, which is avoid rationalizing after the fact. So what do I mean by this? Well, truth of the matter is, most of us, even the most brilliant negotiators, at times will do something that probably wouldn't meet the highest level of ethicality. And one of the things we know from research is that there is this tendency when we are looking backwards after a negotiation that we tend to rationalize our behavior. In other words, we tend to tell a story afterwards that lets us off the hook. This is part of the ethical fading dilemma that Max Bazerman and Ann Tennisbill talk about. So we'll say something like, well, it was all about the circumstances, or, well, I just felt pressured, or the other party was responsible for this. A lot has been written of examples where people act in unethical ways and then retell the story saying that they've been forced to do it, or they had no choice, or they didn't see ethical question. I'm going to share with you an actual example from a recent training I did in negotiation. So I was working with a group of Roman Catholic priests, and in a big negotiation we were doing, one of the priests openly and notoriously lied. And in the debrief, he was called out for lying. But he stood firm saying, well, we were in a simulation and I was in a business negotiation. And so this is what's expected in a business negotiation. And it was completely okay. And I have to tell you, I was pretty stunned by this, right? But this person somehow, because they said, well, I'm not in my role as priest, I'm in my role as business person, therefore the lying is okay, right? What they were engaging in is a rationalization. One of the ways to prevent yourself from getting caught in this rationalization trap is to work with a negotiation coach or to have some kind of mentor or counselor, someone who you trust and who really will keep you on the straight and narrow. So, truth of the matter is that there are legal and professional ethical requirements, but there are also really important ethical guideposts. First, just knowing yourself. What are your values? Who do you want to be? And is this behavior consistent with the best version of yourself? Second, make ethical considerations part of your preparation. Because we know of this dynamic called ethical fading, we need to prepare in advance for how we'll handle ethical quandaries in the midst of the negotiation. And then lastly, after a negotiation, when we're reviewing, avoid rationalizing. The only way we can learn about how to avoid ethical traps is by doing honest reviews afterwards. Okay, keep watching this next video on how to negotiate a higher salary after a job offer. And before you go, do an ethical and just choice by subscribing to my channel, liking this video, and ringing the bell. Thanks for watching. Oh, click, 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 keep watching. Watching will make you a better person. Keep watching.